Okay.
So can we talk to Will, because he emailed us about this?
Yeah. We'll talk to Will, and then we'll get to Ken in a moment, so hang tight, Ken.
All right.
Hey, Will, thanks for waiting through that.
Hi, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, no problem.
To recap what the email was, this is probably going to be a little more boring than the last call. I have a 9-year-old daughter who is here with me, and we wanted to call in because over the last week, she has been having some fear or uncomfortable feelings when thinking about dying. And I know all of the things that we as atheists typically say to other adults about the prospect of death being the end of everything. And when talking with my wife, I've found that talking to an adult is significantly different than talking to a child for me, especially because as a Christian, being raised as a Christian and now an atheist, this wasn't a fear I had as a child because there was the heaven proposition that was very comforting. And the responses about, nothing isn't particularly a bad thing, and you remember before you being born as being bad, and think about all of the life you've got to live before and all the great things that are going to happen, they're not as comforting to a child as they are naturally to an adult. So I was hoping maybe Jen, as kind of the atheist parenting representative on the show in many cases, have you had this conversation with your kid? If so,
Well, I mean,
anything to share?
one of the reasons that I wanted to take your call is because we're actually confronting a similar situation with our son, my wife and I. Turns out our brother-in-law was recently diagnosed with cancer, and it's a pretty grim diagnosis. Okay, and so we're approaching that conversation with our son. We've broached it briefly. We haven't gotten very much into specifics. But he knows that his Uncle Tim is very sick and that basically he's not going to survive. This hasn't been real for him yet because he hasn't seen his uncle since the diagnosis. We've got a family trip coming up in a few weeks, and he's going to see firsthand what this is, what his uncle's going through, and what his cousins are going through. So, I know we're going to have this conversation. I think that there's not any sort of necessarily one thing you can say to a child in this situation that's going to make them more comfortable with it or less fearful. About the only thing you can do is encourage them to continue talking about their feelings. And I know that my son tends not to talk about his feelings at first. And at some point, the barriers come down, and then, usually it's lots of crying and everything, and then we get a lot out of him at that point. But, we work with him through that. We try to support him emotionally. We've had situations where a pet died or something like that. So we kind of know how he handles grief a little bit. We're really not sure how it's going to play out with this situation. And I know you're dealing with a very similar situation with your daughter. Is it that she's afraid of her own mortality or for someone else?
Well, the way she's expressed it is that she's afraid of being dead and it being nothing.
Okay.
I think it's related to something you just said. I think it's related to my own cancer diagnosis. It's not fatal, not mortal or anything, but
Yeah.
I think scary. But her expression of it has been in thinking about being dead and dying and being afraid of it being nothing. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, I don't have any kids, so I should probably shut up. But I'm terrible at shutting up. I normally, when I talk to people about this, I do what you mentioned earlier, which is what was it like to not be alive yet? Because that's, so far as we know, that's what it would be like to be dead. There's no such thing as being dead,
Right.
And so I don't see that there's anything in particular to be afraid of. To me, what I struggle with is the loss.
Right.
And what we talk about quite often in the community is about, the value of life. And when I look at it, it's like, she's 9, so I don't know when her birthday is, but I would imagine, has she had a really good birthday party?
Oh, absolutely.
Cool. That birthday party ended at some point. If we were to spend the entire birthday party worried about when it was going to end and what it was going to feel like to no longer be at the birthday party, that would ruin the party. And I tend to look at it in this pragmatic sense of, I want to have fun at the party and I want the party to be good. So since I can't do anything about the fact that it's going to end and that some point in the future I'm going to be in a situation where I'm no longer at the party, I can't change that. But I can change what I do right now, and that's gonna determine how good that party is. And that analogy stretches all the way throughout life. That yes, it's incredibly sad when we lose people that we love, when they die, when they no longer exist. We have their memories, though, which we can value, and we have the time that we spent with them. And I tend to look at my own life. I don't worry about what it's going to be like to be dead, because I don't think that that's a coherent, it doesn't make sense to me. It won't be like anything. It's not anything. I just stop existing. But I'm fairly confident for some period of time, there are people who are in my life now who will have fond memories. They'll look back on the fun things we did, the time Matt said something stupid on the show, or the time we went and saw this movie, or that one cool party we had, and they will have those things. And while I won't still be alive in any real sense, I'll be alive in the only sense that I can think of that matters. And those things actually make me happier. Would I love to live forever or seemingly forever? Yeah. All of our ancestors throughout history have tried to find ways to avoid death and sat around worrying about what happens after death. I think if we start earlier, teaching people that death is a natural part of this process of life, so that they develop the tools early of how to cope with it, then we hopefully will have less anguish during the process of dying and immediately after, and we can get on to the point of healing and valuing life. Because if all we do is sit around worrying about it, we've crippled the only life that we know we're going to have. If it turns out afterlife, there's some bonus afterlife, well, great. Then you know, that's like finding out that the party gets to keep going when you thought it was going to be over.
Yeah, and I think that's actually really good advice for a young kid. Had a similar conversation with our son last year, because he was obsessing over, the end of summer vacation, and it's, it was just in tears because his summer vacation was over and he didn't want it to be. And so, we had to have this conversation with him about, yeah, but you're ruining, all the excitement with school starting back up, and you've got a new year ahead of you, and there will be holidays coming up. His favorite holiday is Halloween, and that's just around the corner. And and after a while, he started to realize that, yeah, you can't worry about the fact that summer vacation's gone. You got other things to look forward to now. And I think it's the same thing with, preparing kids for death.
Oh, and I think something Jen said earlier is not to be overlooked. When we talk about, we both kind of alluded to ruining the party by worrying about when it ends. Don't ever beat yourself up for how you feel about something.
Right.
If in fact you're sitting at the party and you start to worry about, oh my gosh, it's going to end and I don't want it to end and that's so sad, that's perfectly normal and understandable and acceptable. And when you recognize that this is a natural process of how you feel and how you think about things, that will help you deal with it so that it perhaps has less impact later. But those feelings aren't wrong or bad. That's just you. And we're all like that. None of us want to die. None of us want the party to be over. Matter of fact, my favorite quote from Christopher Hitchens has nothing to do with religion. It was during the time as he was dying, when he said, it's not at all like people suspect that you're being told the party is about to be over. In his view, you're being told the party's going to continue, but you have to leave. And that was the part that kind of hurt him. And I think that's incredibly telling about who we are and how we feel about things. And never, ever beat yourself up too much over how you feel about them. Just be aware of it. And cherish that too, because that's what makes you special and shows that you care about life and you care about people and you care about yourself, and all those things are good.
Yeah. And then I guess the last thing I would say is that sometimes, you know, when a kid has lost someone or something important to them and they just become, you know, overwhelmed with grief, then the best thing you can do is just acknowledge that and just be there for them. So,
Hello?
hello.
Yeah, hey, can you say thanks?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys really make a difference every week. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks.
So one of the calls that I was wanting to actually take
He bailed.
has evidently hung up. He wanted to challenge my claim that I'm more moral than the God of the Bible.
Yeah.
I think that would have been a pretty quick challenge, though,
Yeah.
because, I mean, depending on what your definition or what you think about the God of the Bible, if you think he did, in fact, drown almost everybody except for 8 people, I'd never do that.
Yeah.
So I win.
Yeah.
I also don't put men and women as unequal to the point where women are basically property and slaves. I don't endorse slavery. I don't endorse beating people as long as they don't die within a couple days. I don't endorse the idea of eternal torment or eternal annihilation for finite crimes, or worse yet, thought crimes, where someone is just living an intellectually honest life and saying, I can't believe this because they don't have insufficient evidence, and then punishing them for that.
And I would never allow my child to be tortured in my place, you know, just because I couldn't think of a better way to solve a problem.
And I certainly wouldn't hide playing the world's longest
Yeah.
game of hide and seek, expecting people to find me when I have the power to be unfindable, and then fill people's heads with ideas about life and death that they have no good reason to think are true, so that even lifelong atheists sometimes wake up in the middle of the night with a fear of the hell that they were indoctrinated with. And if this were to happen on my watch as God, I would step in and correct it. And that doesn't happen. I'm not only am I more moral than the God of the Bible, so are you. So is almost every single person I've ever met, including some horrible people, perhaps even some serial killers who just haven't killed as many people as the God of the Bible is reported to have done.